All right, everyone. Welcome back to the Founder Series. I'm Dr. Rebbecca Hurdle. I'm an osteopathic physician and a certified menopause practitioner, and also the founder of Osteopathic Midlife Health. And today I want to start with a question, and I want you to sit with it for a second before I give you all the science on that, because I think about it all the time. But, I've done this. And so have any of you ever been in the middle of a high stake moment, such as like a board presentation, a leadership meeting, a client call, a lecture, an interview, a podcast, and reached for a word or an idea and felt, oh my God, I can't find my word. It just slipped, right? Have you ever walked out of a conversation and thinking like, I used to be sharper than this. I used to be on point. And then wondering if like something's happening to your mind, your brain, too afraid to say it, too afraid to talk to anybody about it, because perhaps you're the only one everyone else is counting on, or a lot of people are counting on, right? And so, if you answered yes, then this is the episode for all of you, because I've answered yes. So today we're going to talk about your brain in menopause and the neuroscience of brain fog, memory changes, and yes, also hearing, because the same hormonal shifts that are affecting your thinking, they're actually affecting your ears too. I talk a lot about how estrogen receptors are everywhere, right? From your head trickling all the way down. This is really where this comes from. And so, what we're going to do here is really talk specifically about what this means for women. And in particular, women founders, women who are building things, who are leading teams, running companies, sitting at the head of tables at exactly the age that those crazy hormones are seemingly to work against them in ways that many of us weren't warned about or don't know about. So there's a 2026 meta-analysis or imaging data, a major UK biobank study, longitudinal hearing research. So by the end of the episode, you'll understand what's happening, why it's happening, and perhaps a few skills so that you can know what to do about it. All right, let's get into it. So in the Founders Journal, I want to tell you a story. And this story really starts with women that I see all the time, having patients, CEOs, founders, clinicians, high achieving women running companies who are brilliant. They sit across from me and say that they think that they're losing their mind. They're losing their touch. They can't remember their CFO's name. They can't remember the things that they're trying to say as they're preparing for a meeting or in the middle of a meeting. And they've worked with these people for years, right? This is second nature to women. And what I remember most about these conversations is, to be honest, the shame that these women are feeling. It's like a quiet terror that the mind she'd built her entire career on was starting to not work, right? Like betray them. And the fact that no one has told them and that they haven't told anyone, not their partners, not their spouses, not their business partners, not their clinicians before seeing me, because these women are the leaders, and leaders don't crack, right? And so then I start to think about my own experience running my household, running my business, starting new businesses, podcasts, and the days where you're how many patients in, trying to manage a team, trying to finish talks, trying to think about all of the things that you need to do, including taking care of your family, reaching for words that these are words that you use all the time. And there's this half-second gap, or sometimes more. Sometimes it doesn't come back. Sometimes it does. But that gap is new. And I certainly noticed it. The fluidity of conversation, the ability to pull those words back out from your brain, not being able to think of simple words that you use all the time. And no one seems to talk about it, not in founder circles, not in CEO coaching and leadership development. The perimenopausal transition is happening to women at the same exact time that they are in the height of their professional careers, right? So we're talking about women in their early to mid 50s, primed by decades of experience, running the most complex, high stakes work of their careers. And now simultaneously navigating one of the most significant neurological transitions of their lives. And it's not that collision we know is occurring. It's not a personal failing. We know this is physiology, right? And it's a physiological reality that our professional culture almost pretends it doesn't exist. It's not talked about. It's not discussed. So today, one of the things I want to do is really have a name for it, explain it, and then figure out what to do about it, because there's actually quite a lot that we can do. So let's into the midlife minute. And so we're going to start with some numbers because they're more striking than I think a lot of us realize. But up to 80% of perimenopausal and menopausal or postmenopausal women report neurological symptoms. And those can include things like cognitive disturbances. It's not a minority, you guys. This is a majority that almost every woman going through this transition is going to experience some type of cognitive change and not just self-reported complaints alone, right? So the 2026 meta-analysis of 26 studies, nearly 10,000 participants. And these participants found that perimenopausal women showed objectively measurable cognitive differences compared to their premenopausal women, especially in verbal memory, in working memory, attention, and executive functioning. Can anyone else relate to that, right? The ability to multitask like you could before, and now you feel like you're just squirreling everywhere, right? So it's real and it's measurable. And it's not just age alone. So the idea that brain fog encompasses the subjective complaints of forgetfulness, difficulty concentrating, word finding, and mental slowness that can affect daily functioning, work, and relationships. You guys, these women are pulling out of the workforce, not accepting promotions. The central driver of this is the 17 beta estradiol. Really have a name for it, explain it, and then figure out what to do about it. Because there's actually quite a lot that we can do. So let's hop into the midlife minute. And so we're going to start with some numbers because they're more striking than I think a lot of us realize. But up to 80% of perimenopausal and menopausal or postmenopausal women report neurological symptoms. And those can include things like cognitive disturbances. It's not a minority, you guys. This is a majority that almost every woman going through this transition is going to experience some type of cognitive change and not just self-reported complaints alone, right? So the 2026 meta-analysis of 26 studies, nearly 10,000 participants. And these participants found that perimenopausal women showed objectively measurable cognitive differences compared to their premenopausal women, especially in verbal memory, in working memory, attention, and executive functioning. Can anyone else relate to that, right? The ability to multitask like you could before, and now you feel like you're just squirreling everywhere. So it's real and it's measurable, and it's not just age alone. So the idea that brain fog encompasses the subjective complaints of forgetfulness, difficulty concentrating, word finding, and mental slowness that can affect daily functioning, work, and relationships. You guys, these women are pulling out of the workforce, not accepting promotions. The central driver of this is the 17 beta estradiol or estrogen, right? And here's what most people don't know is that estrogen is not just a reproductive hormone. And if you follow me on social, I preach this all the time, but that it is a master regulator of brain metabolic function. It supports how your brain uses glucose, which is its primary fuel. It promotes synaptic connections. It supports neuronal structure and regulates gene expression in the brain. So when estradiol drops and during perimenopause, it doesn't just drop, right? We know that it fluctuates wildly and that brain has to recalibrate. And during that time that it's recalibrating, you are feeling it. You can't remember the word banana. You are putting your keys in the fridge. You are putting your food in the microwave and forgetting to turn it on. You are in the middle of a meeting and cannot recall what you are going to say. You cannot make a fluid sentence. You can't remember the name of a person that you've been working with. And so brain imaging studies also show us what's happening in real time. And during perimenopause and the transition, that brain enters a relative hypometabolic state. It's using less energy than it used to. In a 2026 MR spectroscopy study, found lower brain creatine concentrations in perimenopausal women. And creatine is a key neuronal energy buffer, so to speak, with the largest reductions in the thalamus and parietal white matter. And those reductions correlated directly with concentration difficulties. There are also structural changes. Neuroimaging shows decreased gray and white matter volume, reduced cerebral blood flow, and particularly for those who carry the ApoE epsilon, which is a 4-gene variant, increased amyloid beta deposition. That's the protein associated with Alzheimer's disease or Alzheimer's risk, excuse me. And so why does this matter? Well, women represent approximately 2/3 of people living with Alzheimer's in the United States. Earlier age at menopause is associated with greater tau pathology and lower cognitive scores across memory and executive function, especially in the ApoE epsilon 4 carriers. So, and the reason I'm sharing this is because the menopausal transition is a neurological inflection point, if you will. And so what you do at this inflection point appears to matter for your long-term brain health. I just think it's fascinating, guys. All right. What else do we have? Okay. So, part of the piece I want to leave you with from this section is that most of these brain changes appear to stabilize or partially reverse postmenopausal. All right. So this is not the end all be all, which can be really scary, right? I think about even just my own cognitive changes through this perimenopause transition. And I am just like, okay, thank goodness that this is not going to be the way that I am forever because it's exhausting. So the brain finds new pathways, produces more ATP, and cognitive performance does tend to recover. We don't know what that means, though. We don't know to what extent that's going to be, right? Will you fully have all of that functioning back? Will you have a portion of that back? How much of that is going to be recovered? But we do know that your brain does adapt. It's so good at adapting. And there's evidence also, of course, that hormonal support when started early, right, within that 10 years can make that adaptation go better, or it can really support that adaptation. Now, what are some brain changes observed during perimenopause? Some brain changes observed during perimenopause stable or partially reversed postmenopause, like I just said. Let's break that down. That just means that it's suggesting a compensatory neuroplastic mechanism that your brain is working and it's learning a new way, if that makes sense. So let's hop over into the lab and talk about the connection that no one is talking about, menopause and hearing, which I think is fascinating, to be honest, because it's something I didn't really notice until I started doing some research and then interviewed me about brain fog and hearing. So I was doing some more research on the hearing changes and cognitive changes. But I think this is fascinating. Our young women, you guys, our young women starting to notice in their loved ones. And so this is spurring them to do research. This is great. Okay. So let's talk about something I think doesn't come up very often in menopause conversations at all, but it does come up in a lot of high performance professional environments, which is hearing. Now, listen, I don't know about all of you, but I can tell you that hearing changes, everyone attributes to just getting older. I'm getting older. I just can't hear as well. But listen to this. I thought this was interesting. So specifically, the ability to follow complex conversations, track multiple threads, catch the nuance in what someone says across a conference table. That skill set is foundational to leadership. We know that. And it is directly affected by the menopausal transition. I'm experiencing that. I'm just trying to listen to a conference, having to listen to maybe a webinar twice to catch everything, trying to figure out why my brain, when someone is talking sometimes or multiple conversations, things are just going wherever. And then I'm just like, what did you say? Or if there's multiple conversations going on, this just happened to me not that long ago. I'm trying to talk with someone and then I'm half hearing the other conversation. And then I'm just I have no idea what you just said to me. That is new. So while researching this is what I found, that women's hearing declines more rapidly at the onset of menopause than in age-matched men, right? So a reversal of the advantage women typically have before menopause, right? Our hearing is fantastic. We hear everything. How many times are your kids just how did you hear that? Or your husband whisper something, your partner whisper something, and they're like, how did you hear that? And the mechanism is estrogen, right? Again, this comes back to estrogen receptors being everywhere. They're like, hello, I'm here. So estrogen receptors are present in the cochlea, which is the structure in your inner ear that converts sound into neural signals. Estradiol supports cochlear blood flow and helps the brain process auditory input. So what you're hearing, your brain has to process that. Okay. So that's what they mean by auditory input. Things that are coming in, then it needs to go to your brain for your brain to understand what's going on. And so when estrogen drops, both of those systems can be affected, right? Makes sense. It really was helpful to learn these things because I really just thought I was getting old and couldn't hear. Well, part of that is probably true. And in 2025 longitudinal study of almost 45 100 women identified two distinct trajectories. About 71% had stable hearing until their final menstrual period. Then they experienced a gradual decline. But about 28%, nearly 3 in 10, had a weaker baseline hearing that declined faster and more steeply. And I was talking to a colleague and friend of mine about that too, because she's like, I can't really hear, but it seemed to have gotten worse in this late perimenopause, early menopause transition that we're all in. So that second group had a significantly higher rates of overweight and elevated blood sugar as well. Y'all know I talk about metabolism and how inflammation and sugar affects things. So a UK Biobank study of more than 214,000 women found that earlier menopause, so menopause before the age of 40, and surgical menopause both carried meaningfully elevated hearing loss risk. Later menopause and longer reproductive lifespan seem to be associated with better hearing outcomes. And so let's just stop for a second too, because when we talk about Alzheimer's risk, or we talk about hearing issues, we do talk about dementia risk, right? When you cannot hear, when patients cannot hear, and we really talk about this more in the elderly population, they ignore things around them, and that dementia risk changes. So making sure that you're addressing hearing loss, making sure that you are physically active are a couple of the very important ways that we can help that dementia risk. So some women pass the standard hearing test perfectly fine, but still struggle to follow conversation in noisy rooms, right? Is this you? It's me sometimes. I was just talking about that. Or they can't place where a sound is coming from. Literally, I've pinged my phone, I don't know how many times to try to find it. And I'm telling you, I can hear it. It's like right here. And I cannot pinpoint where that phone is. It is so frustrating for me. So that's not the ear, that's the brain struggling to interpret sound after estrogen withdrawal or changes. So that last point, I really do feel is critical for high performing professionals. So you may have normal peripheral hearing and still be experiencing the central auditory processing changes, right? Difficulty parsing fast speech. I do listen to things on 1.5. I probably do not get it all in. Sometimes I'm listening to it 2 or 3 times, but I'm telling you, when I switch it back down to 1, I literally cannot do it. But maybe that has to do with some of the concentration changes. So, okay, let's go back. All right. So difficulty parsing fast speech, tracking multiple voices, understanding in noise. I can't. That one gets me too. Like all the kids are talking to me and I'm just like, I have no idea what on earth they're saying to me. Everyone else is just be quiet so I can focus on the one person that really needs to speak to me right now. I don't remember being like that as much. So these are the kind of environments though that are the daily reality of leadership, right? Of leadership, of being mom, of multitasking. So if you've been leaving meetings feeling like you missed something you should have caught, maybe we need to ask ourselves honestly, like, is this attention or is this auditory processing? Is it a little bit of both because we're in the menopause transition? But if it's truly attention versus auditory processing, they can have different solutions depending. And they both do have solutions, right? All right. So I want to look through when the boardroom meets the brain fog. So now I want to talk a little directly to those women who are building something, because the standard menopause conversation, as important as it is, I'm not sure was quite written with you in mind, with us in mind. So the standard narrative goes something like this. You might feel foggy. You might be forgetful. Try to be patient with yourself. And that's fine advice for some contexts, but it's not a complete answer. And it's not a complete answer for a woman who has a team counting on her to make very clear decisions, a boardroom expecting strategic vision, clients expecting follow through, or a company that doesn't pause because her hormones are in flux, right? So let's get a little specific about what this actually looks like, I think, in founder and CEO life. So the cognitive domains most affected during perimenopause are verbal memory, working memory, attention, and executive function. So let's translate that a little bit, okay? So verbal memory is what you use when you're recalling what was said in a meeting from last week. Guys, I literally really struggle with this. I really, really do. This one is a big one for me. It's really difficult. Or accessing language quickly in a negotiation. Yet another one, right? Like after it's done, you're like, oh, I should have. Working memory is what you use to hold multiple threads simultaneously, tracking a complex conversation while formulating your response, right? And attention is what lets you stay sharp through a 4-hour strategy session. And then executive function is then how you sequence, prioritize, and decide under pressure. So those are really complex things. They're not peripheral skills, right? These are the core competencies of leadership. They're also precisely the domains under the most physiological pressure during the perimenopausal transition. I've seen it. I'm experiencing it. And not to add overwhelm, but I'm saying it because naming the mechanism is how you stop blaming yourself, how I stop blaming myself, and then just start to problem solve, because that's what we do, right? So again, the cognitive domains most affected during perimenopause and menopause transition: verbal memory, working memory, attention, executive function. And those are the skills that leadership demands most. So this is a biological issue, y'all. Okay. Not character. And this biology we know can be supported. So what does strategic support look like for women founders who are navigating perimenopause and menopause transition? So first, protect your peak performance windows. Most people have 2 to 4 hours of genuine cognitive peak each day. Okay, this is important. Do you work better early in the morning? Do you work better late morning? Do you work better mid-afternoon, early evening, right? So for many women in perimenopause, those windows can be shorter and more sensitive to sleep deprivation and stress. All right, that's another thing. And I have noticed this as well. Like, I have to navigate my day. Maybe you're noticing you can't see as many patients, and because of the stressors and sleep, you need better sleep. You need longer sleep than maybe you did 10 years ago, right? You can't see as many patients maybe as you did 10 years ago. Maybe you could see 36 plus patients, and now it's 24, 25. So know when yours are. Put your highest stake cognitive work, so decisions, writing, strategy, inside those windows where you work best. And make sure you stop scheduling your hardest thinking for the end of a long day or when you are not at your best, whatever that is for you. And you need to figure that out. It's important. So make sure that your best work is done when your brain is working the best for you. So figure that out. It's really important. Second, reduce unnecessary cognitive load. So this is where operational systems, strong teams, clear documentation pay dividends that go beyond efficiency. So every decision you offload or systematize is cognitive bandwidth that you preserve for the work that actually requires you. That's really important because some of us type A people really find it very difficult to delegate. You must delegate. Delegation isn't a luxury at this stage, okay? It is a clinical recommendation. You got to do it. Third, be honest with your clinician, with your physician. I cannot tell you how many high-achieving women I've seen who minimize their symptoms for years, and I'm sure we've all done it, because they didn't want to seem like they couldn't handle it, right? We don't do well with saying, I can't handle something. We don't like to be that vulnerable, but your clinician cannot help you optimize what you haven't disclosed. So the women who are navigating this transition most effectively are the ones who came in early, had real conversations about hormonal support, and got ahead of the curve rather than playing catch up. But even if you're playing catch up, we can still do this. Fourth, consider what your company culture communicates about this, right? That's really important. You can bring in people who can teach menopause culture, perimenopause culture, and support to your company. So if you are a founder with a team, your willingness to name this openly, to say, here's what the data shows. Here's what I'm doing about it. Here's why we should take midlife women's health seriously, is a form of leadership that has actual downstream effects on retention, on culture, and the women who work for you and are navigating the same thing silently, most likely, right? So you built something, you are still building something, and we all deserve a body and a brain that are supported at the level that you're operating. And I just think that's really important to think about. So the practical reset, what can you actually do? Okay, so here's a practical layer because the science matters, but so does Monday morning, right? Exercise. Y'all know I love it. It's so important. It is the most powerful lever. Combination of aerobic movement and strength training produces measurable improvements in cognitive test scores, even in little as just a few weeks. We know this. This is documented. This is not new information. You got to exercise to preserve brain health, attention, memory, and processing speed as well. So the typical aim for at least 150 minutes of moderate aerobic activity per week, plus strength work at least twice a week. I would be safe to say 3 to 4 times a week for that strength training, because bones, that's for a different episode. All of our schedules are full. I get it, but schedule it like a board meeting. Schedule it like a date. Schedule it like intimacy, because that should be scheduled too, because it's that important. And eat for your brain. Nutrition is key. Mediterranean style nutrition, protein, fruits, vegetables, whole grain, fish, olive oil, nuts. Limited processed food is associated with better cognitive outcomes and lower long-term dementia risk. Okay. Not a fad. It's very consistent, the most consistent nutritional pattern in the cognitive aging literature. And sleep. Yeah, we talk about it all the time. Sleep is non-negotiable. Sleep is where your brain consolidates memory. It repairs. It clears waste, restores executive function. So if night sweats, racing thoughts, insomnia are interrupting your sleep, that is a problem. It is a medical problem and it has solutions. So don't white knuckle your way through that. Okay. Make sure that you are bringing that up with your clinician if this is what's happening, so that they can address it and get them to stop. And manage your metabolic numbers, blood pressure, blood sugar, cholesterol. All of these affect cerebral blood flow, which affects cognitive performance and hearing. So they're not just cardiovascular metrics, right? They're brain metrics as well. So if yours are off, making sure that you're addressing them now is one of the highest return investments you can make, right, in your long-term performance. So on hormone therapy, we know timing is everything, right? The research is consistently showing that starting hormone therapy around the time of menopause or within the first 10 years of your last menstrual period is associated with the strongest cognitive benefits, right? So if you're in perimenopause right now, that window is open. Make sure that you're talking to a certified menopause practitioner. It's not a one size fits all, but it deserves a very real, very informed conversation, right? Don't accept dismissal or a pat on the shoulder that you're just getting older. We know that starting more than 10 years post-menopause does not appear to carry the same benefits, okay? So if you're in it now is the time to have the conversation. And finally, get a baseline hearing screen as part of your routine health maintenance, especially if you have any metabolic risk factors, you went through early menopause or had surgical menopause, and if you're struggling in those complex audio environments, right? Noisy meetings, phone calls, multi-speaker conversations. Mention that specifically to your practitioner as well. So it's a real signal and it deserves a real response, and you can just go get a hearing test. Okay. An evaluation. All right, y'all. That's today's episode of the Founder Series. And so we walked through the neuroscience of what's actually happening in your brain during the menopausal transition. It's a lot. We covered the hearing research, which I know surprised some of you because it surprised me for sure. And I had like an aha moment for sure. And we spent real time on what this specifically means for women who are leading, building, and operating at a high level. And we landed on what you can actually do starting now. So, top thing I want you to take away from today: cognitive changes you may be experiencing are not evidence that you are less capable. They are evidence that your biology is in the middle of a major transition, and one that has a physiology, a timeline, and a very real support options. So, none of us are losing our edge, but we're navigating a shift, right? And the women who come through this strongest are the ones who name it, seek support, and refuse to disappear quietly through it. So if this episode resonated, share it with a woman you know who is in this season and building something. She needs to hear this. These conversations are how we change the standard of care, one family at a time. Make sure to find me and follow me on Instagram and YouTube, Dr. Rebbecca Hurdle, TikTok, LinkedIn. And if you're ready for personalized support, find me at osteopathic midlife health.com, which is also in the show notes. So I'm Dr. Rebbecca Hurdle, and this has been the Founder Series. And until next time, take care of yourself and take care of each other, and always be kind.